This movie was not supposed to work. That was the problem. In 2011, a comedy with no major male stars, no franchise, and no safety net quietly hit theaters. What happened next exposed a lie Hollywood had been telling for years. The executives who greenlit it had no idea what was about to hit them. Here is the part most people never talk about. The film almost did not get made. The reason it almost did not get made tells you everything about what was broken in Hollywood before it arrived. The old playbook. To understand what Bridesmaids changed, you first need to understand what the playbook looked like before it. From the mid-2000s through 2010, studio comedy had a formula, and that formula had a face. It was male. The Hangover, Superbad, Knocked Up, and The 40-Year-Old Virgin were the film studios pointed to when they talked about what an R-rated comedy could do at the box office. Big numbers, broad audiences, safe bets. Women in these films existed mostly at the edges. The girlfriend, the wife, the disapproving mother, occasionally funny, never the engine. This was not an accident. It was a business decision built on one assumption. Female-led R-rated comedies do not make money. Studios had convinced themselves that men drove comedy ticket sales, that a raunchy ensemble film fronted by women was a commercial risk not worth taking. There was no data that actually proved this. There was just a belief, and that belief had become policy. Meanwhile, a generation of genuinely talented female comedians was being left on the bench. Women who had sharpened their instincts for years at Second City and The Groundlings and on Saturday Night Live, they were working. But they were not leading. That was the old playbook, and it had been running unchallenged for years. The bet. Here is where the story gets interesting. The people behind Bridesmaids were not outsiders trying to blow up the system. They were insiders. Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo wrote the script together. Paul Feig directed it. Judd Apatow produced it. Apatow had already delivered The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up. His name meant box office, and his involvement gave Universal a reason to listen. But what they were pitching was still a hard sell. It was an R-rated ensemble comedy with no male lead and a budget that required real studio commitment. The argument was not that female-led comedies could work in theory. The argument was that this specific cast, this specific script, this specific tone would prove it in practice. If you want more deep dives into the business decisions that shaped comedy history, subscribe now and stay with us for the full breakdown. The casting was deliberate at every single position. Wiig brought Saturday Night Live credibility. Maya Rudolph brought warmth. Rose Byrne was cast against type as a polished antagonist with genuine comic timing. Ellie Kemper and Wendy McClendon-Covey filled out the ensemble with characters that felt like actual people, not archetypes. And then there was Melissa McCarthy. McCarthy was known, but she had never been given a role like Megan in a major studio comedy, a character who was loud and fearless and completely uninterested in being likable in the traditional sense. The role existed because the filmmakers trusted her to do something nobody had let her do before. Universal eventually said yes. And now the real gamble began. The earthquake. Bridesmaids opened in May 2011 on a production budget of $32.5 million. It made $288 million worldwide. That number did not just outperform expectations. It demolished the entire framework studios had been using to assess risk in this space. On a dollar-for-dollar return, it outperformed The Hangover. It outperformed films held up for years as the gold standard of R-rated comedy. The word of mouth was extraordinary. Women were going back to see it multiple times. People felt like they were finally watching something that reflected their actual experience. And then came the Oscar nominations. Best Original Screenplay for Wiig and Mumolo. Best Supporting Actress for Melissa McCarthy. That second nomination mattered most. McCarthy had delivered a physical, anarchic performance in a mainstream studio comedy, and the Academy had responded. That was not supposed to happen. Inside the studios, the conversation shifted fast. There was a massive audience for female-led comedy that had not been served. Whoever moved first was going to make a lot of money. The old playbook was not just wrong. It had been costing the industry for years. The new playbook. What followed Bridesmaids was not a subtle shift. It was a wave. The Heat in 2013, Bad Moms in 2016, Girls Trip in 2017, Booksmart in 2019, Joyride in 2023. Each one was a direct line back to what Bridesmaids had proven, that female ensemble comedies with real teeth could find large audiences and generate real returns. The most significant individual consequence was Melissa McCarthy. Before Bridesmaids, she was a supporting player. After it, she was a bankable comedy lead. Identity Thief, Spy, The Boss. Films built specifically around her as the engine. That trajectory does not happen without the Megan role, without the Oscar nomination, without the proof that an audience would show up specifically to watch her. The casting playbook changed in two concrete ways. First, studios began actively looking for female ensemble casts as a commercial strategy rather than a creative exception. The ensemble model, reserved almost exclusively for male-led comedies, was now understood to work with women in every seat. Second, the types of female characters being written shifted. Characters could be messy, selfish, and physically chaotic, and still be the protagonist. Flawed women could drive a story. That was Bridesmaids. And it came directly from what Wig and Mumolo put on the page and what Feig refused to soften on screen. Bridesmaids did not ask Hollywood for permission to exist. It just existed. And then it made so much money that the entire industry had to recalibrate. The people who made it knew the old assumptions were wrong. They had been watching talented women get left out of the conversation for years. The script was the argument. The box office was the proof. What changed was not just who got cast in studio comedies. What changed was who gets to be the engine of a story, who gets to be flawed and loud and the reason people buy a ticket. That question does not have the same answer it did before May 2011, and it never will again. One film, one bet, and the rules have never gone back to what they were.